Hello and welcome to the Strip Pile Naked panel here at Thought Bubble 2020. I'm Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou, and for the past 4 years I've been breaking down and discussing interesting approaches to the comic book form on a YouTube channel called Strip Pile Naked, as well as in the Eisner winning magazine Panel by Panel. I've run a panel similar to this at the past few Thought Bubble shows, so genuinely delighted to be able to bring you this sort of strange online version of it this year. I'm joined by three of my favourite people making comics at the moment. I've got writer Matt Fraction, who you'll know from things like Hawkeye, November with Elsa Charretier, and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen with Steve Lieber and co. We've got Rosemary Valero-O'Connell, who's the artist of one of the best comics of last year, one of my favourite comics of last year as well. Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me. And we're also joined by Emma Rios, who is the writer of Mirror and the artist on the phenomenal Pretty Deadly. We're all in different time zones in different parts of the world, in various states of refuge. So these chats were conducted individually, but I presented them here as part of a kind of interwoven conversation on approaches to creating comics. As usual for this panel, we're going to start with the writing, so we're going to jump straight over to a conversation with Matt Fraction. Looking at like the body of your work, obviously you've written a lot of comic books, but there is a bunch of comic books that you've worked on where you do have quite strong sort of cartoonist collaborators. Yeah. Is that how much of that is by design, and how does that naturally change the way you think about those works?
I mean, it's as much by design as it can be when you're not in control of your own ship. You know what I mean? Given my druthers, those are always my choices. You know, the self-deprecating answer is that strong collaborators cover for your weaknesses. You know,
right?
But it's kind of not self-deprecating. It's kind of true, right? Like I've been lucky to work with talented people, and I will never be able to outwrite their hand, you know? So that's just a part of it. The joy of collaboration is playing into one another's strengths, and you be sweet, I'll be sour, you be crunchy, I'll be chewy, and finding how to make it work. And it's different every time. Every collaborator is different. And I think that there's this process, and it takes a minute to find how to do it. You know, I think you can see issue 2, 3, 4 in any kind of lengthy collaboration with somebody. If really 80 to 100 pages in, you find it at that point, or you just never find it, and it just never happens. Right? Which happens sometimes.
Does it like actively make you lean? Like this is obvious. This is a very broad, so it might not be this easy to sort of quantify against all these different collaborators. But does it make you lean into a certain style of writing?
Every as different as a collaborator is, I would like to think it might be microscopic differences that only I perceive as being different, but it's different every time. You know, it's a different. I'll write into something. You know, I was trying to articulate this. I'm doing a commentary edition of November for Elsa's Kickstarter. And at this point, it's 12,000 words, and it's as close to a textbook as I'm ever going to write. You know what I mean? Because like, oh, what's the commentary? And like literally starting with the first image, how do I comment on that? Well, I have to talk about this, and to talk about that, I have to, you know, and I kind of kept going back to back and back. But I was trying to articulate this, and it comes, I think, in me from a place of loving comics and being a fan of them, and also with a couple exceptions, I've never not known who I was writing for. And with a couple of exceptions, I've never not been a fan of who I was writing for. And so that kind of comic brain takes over, and I think about what I like to see in their work. And what is the guy who's going to be at the shop on Wednesday want to see from a Steve Lieber, Jimmy Olsen comic, or whatever. From Elsa, who is going from this kind of slick and sheen world of whether it's Infinite Loop or the Star Wars stuff or anything, you know, to you know, like there's just that, what do I want to see out of somebody? What haven't I seen before? What excites me? What made me a fan? And then trying to translate that to writer me, and do my best to figure out then how to coax that out of them. You know, how to write that for them.
Emma, in a similar vein to Mai, so you've also written for Hui Lim with Mirror, who's written her own work as well. And you're also an artist, right? So does this change the way you think about writing scripts? Like, do you kind of write them knowing how how you would want the page to look if you were drawing it, for example?
It's like, for me, I'm quite an intrusive artist myself. Can help it. So when I write, I try to leave a lot of space, especially for someone like Hui. Hui and I met like about 12 years ago, like in a workshop in Japan, in which we both create a comic together, in which both wrote and drew. Mm-hmm. Like similar to this, but a little different. We actually were painting one over the other, over the art, to try to do some kind of blend. It was like a fantastic experience, but it's true that it's a person who I got to know, understand through her work and through the way she was able to express herself better through work, like me. So it's been a long time through 12 years of looking at one another's art. And so when we got to the Mirror, it's not that I would write for anyone, for a person I wouldn't know, like, because one, I'm super shy. Two, I'm Spanish, so writing in a second language was like so goddamn scary. And three, I can't help like writing like an artist. I think you're going to like that because of what we spoke before. But it's true that I wouldn't write like explaining everything that has to be on the panel, like stopping to tell how, this is a medium shot, or this should show the background, or this is a white shot or white panel or whatever. It would be more like trying to write as if it were a theater play.
Right.
Besides, with long descriptions of the feelings of the characters and the atmosphere, because it's the kind of things I like to work with. And that is a thing I think I have in common with how Hui works, because as we kind of grew, like looking at one another's art, I feel I can understand the way she works quite well. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to write for her precisely thinking on what I like and what she likes, and trying to look for those things in common that we had already used in the past to try to create this person that is not her, not me, like a different one, no?
Well, discussing the idea of writer and artist not feeling separate but becoming one, Rosemary, from an artist perspective, it'd be really interesting to hear about your writing in the art. Like, looking at Laura Dean, for example, this was something that Mariko wrote more like a play, right? Because we had her on the panel at Football last year, and she said that she didn't really do like a full script thing when she does the graphic novels. Is a bit more open than that.
Yeah, basically. The script was initially sent as just, she had a few indicators for this is where they are, this is whatever, but yeah, it was mostly up to me to do the paneling choices.
So what are you looking for in the script, and then what you're looking for in your roughs to kind of, because I guess it's emotional value, but what kind of things are you trying to pull out of the script to know how you want to approach the page layout?
Sure. I mean, when I'm doing my own work, I don't sort of think of the separation between words and images, but when you're kind of translating a written script, which is sort of done in the style of storytelling that all prose is done, you are having to sort of translate and transmute that and kind of alchemize that into like the language of comics, which is, greater than the sum of the parts of just prose storytelling or just visual storytelling. And the way that I try to map out what I am feeling and what the reader is supposed to be feeling in the perfect iteration of this comic. Like, what is the precise, specific emotion that we are trying to pull out, and in what way are we trying to pull it out? And once I have isolated that, the work of comics, becomes kind of figuring out what combination of visual elements are going to get you to that emotional response. So, comics have this sort of unique control over time, like the ability to make it malleable and to sort of use that to the advantage of the story. Like a page of comics can be it can encompass a second or 1,000 years, and paneling, you know, is what determines that. That's like, when I think about what the work of comic storytelling is, it is in panel choice. You know, it's in how we lay out the page. Their unique language kind of happens there, like not just in choosing what moments fill the panels, but in choosing how the design of the page aids you in your attempt to find the most effective visual transmission of, you know, a feeling, a moment, a story beat.
Right.
So their shape, their sequence, and the spaces between them is where all the storytelling happens. So with Laura Dean specifically, it's, you know, it's a story. A lot of the most important moments of that story happen in either these moments of intense intimacy or these moments of like an intense disconnect, an intense loneliness. So I like, you know, the parts of the comic where Freddie is particularly attuned to Laura's distance, you know, to like her loneliness. She's shown a lot smaller within the panels, more fragmented, more isolated. And then like on the opposite side of the spectrum, you know, the panels, like the panels where she's reconciling with Doodle at the end, where she is feeling sort of like the height of intimacy and of connection. You know, I think those scenes are, in the script, were sort of the most emotionally charged. The paneling in those scenes is very closely cropped, very tactile. You know, like the camera is sort of so close to the figure that you kind of cross into their personal space and like have to feel the intimacy of that moment yourself.
Yeah, like to me, that's absolutely fascinating. Like, I love the discussion of like really trying to interpret a script in the way that shows, you know, you're like actively like writing when you're doing the artwork. So Emma, are you actively leaving that room for Hui when you're writing Mirror? Because there's a great, so I pulled down this page, there's a great page really early in the first volume that I want to discuss, where you've got this like spilt cup of tea that I thought was like particularly interesting and visual. So could you talk a little bit about how you go about writing a page like that and kind of like leaving it open for the artist too?
For example, in this page of Mirror, they show me, for example, it comes from the other one, and the other one is a moment in which Ivan has an argument with Gaspek after speaking about the animals, so he throws away the cup. And I think it's very difficult to remember what was written, you know, on the script or something. But Hui doesn't like to draw violence at all. Right. So I imagine like the cup on the wall was my idea. I don't know. But for example, I'm sure that I didn't tell her to start the flashback from the pieces and the tea on the floor, you know. So that was totally hers.
Well, that's what I thought was like really interesting, because that felt like a thing that you were doing pretty deadly as well.
Oh, like, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like this kind of artifice that we already talked about in panel and the issue we talked for the last arc. So yeah, totally, I could have done that, and I love it, and I like it a lot how it works. But I remember precisely that. I think I may have. It's very difficult, really, to remember like what was written and what not, because in the end we build everything together. It's everything through conversations, like, how do you think we could do this thing, or how Ivan would feel? But, you know, this thing of blood and suffering and all this drama is my like, because she's like way more stylish than these, you know, like she managed to create like perfect situations. But I really like this page because it was the beginning when I started to see that we were not going to be able to do action, and that every action that we were going to have in Mirror was going to be told afterwards, which is a constant in the whole book that helps a lot to bring this sadness in the end. And if I were the one who had drawn this, I would have spent more timeline drawing this, because I think it's fun for me. On the other hand, I would have lost all these languageness, which is beautiful, and it feels way tougher than you know, actually see things. So So yeah, I kind of love it so much. But I have to say this, like I don't tell Hui anything. Or I just want to my when I was writing this, I only wanted to inspire her.
Mhm, mhm. With November, something like November especially, it's got this kind of incredibly tight structure and approach to the story. Like in this page, you've got like the visual mirroring, you've got the kind of like like color mirroring and stuff like that. And it kind of feels quite controlled. So is that something that kind of comes early in your process, or is it something that kind of you kind of want to build these things after once you've seen the page come together? Like how does that form?
Project to project, that'll change. Something like November, it came in fairly early, but that was just a function of the way the story was going to be told. It came in early in the process, which is kind of weird, but so much of November was built on formal concerns and sort of coming from a place of, and quite frankly, OCD. And wanting to write something really strictly formal that satisfied my OCD to a place of numerology, you know what I mean? To a place of like, there's a reason why it's 12-page chapters, right? But so we've got these characters that don't. Only one character knows everyone, and there's discrete time periods, and there's color schemes to denote what time period each character is in at any given frame, and sometimes we flash back and flash forward, or we'll see the same shot repeated, only it's a character is young and then the character is old, and that, you know, so a lot of that was kind of planned, even if I didn't know how or what it was going to look like or where it was going to be deployed. I had that, like, part of the rigidity of formalism, of a kind of strict abeyance and adherence to to that kind of formalism, provides such a logic and strict kind of underpinning and weight that I knew we can kind of just go into a fugue state in the storytelling, and the underpinning will keep it together. The chewy and the crispy will work. Like we can have a character in a alcoholic fugue state, skipping across memories and present perceptions, and we're going to be able to. It will make sense because by virtue of it having this organizational principle, it will make sense. Or maybe not. Maybe it's gibberish. I don't know.
Well, this is a much broader question off the back of that. But like, how important do you think it is for someone writing comics to be able to kind of like visualize what they're scripting? Like, do you think it is important for someone to be able to fully be like, I want this, like, obviously not necessarily directing that in the page, but knowing that I want this page to be able to look like this? Do you think that is an important asset, or do you think that kind of also falls onto the artist side of, you know, their kind of responsibility? I
think all of our scripts should be written in pencil, you know, and I very rarely will call shots unless it's for specific effect, and even then, the important thing is the effect, not the shots, right? So I want it to feel like this or look like this, but here, do it better. Here's my shitty version. Now you make it good, right? I mean, look, Alfred Hitchcock didn't plan the shower scene in Psycho. Saul Bass planned the shower scene in Psycho, right? Like, Hitchcock knew, well, I'm not going to do this better than Saul Bass. So Saul, here's what I want. Saul Bass storyboarded it all out. And then Hitchcock just shot what Saul Bass, right? Like it's okay. That's the effect is the important thing, not who did it. Do you lose me again? Oh, no, you're there. Okay. So it's the more I gave myself over to collaboration, the more I gave myself over to my collaborators, the better my work got. And we're in a writer-dominated moment in the industry, and that's making for some reedy ass, boring comics to look at. of which I have written many. Like, I get it, right? But it has been a mission over the last, if you divide my, like really, like since Fear itself, where I got so sick of the sound of my voice that I kind of, for the first time in my career, I threw everything out and tried to start over. But started to look into writing Marvel style, started to writing plot style for artists and things like that, and talking to letterers as collaborators, talking to colorists as collaborators, not just as hired hands, but like, I think part of the reason November does what it does is because there are 5 artists working on the project, all of them doing what they do uncontrolled by the others. There are questions I won't comment on amongst the group because they think I can offer an opinion, but no, I'm going to let the artists talk this out and find their accord. You don't need me to come in, right? Like, we brought Kurt Ankeny in to do the lettering, and he decided each character was going to have their own thing. That wasn't me. That was him. And what those styles were was him. He based the cursive is based on Mother Teresa's handwriting. That's such I would never in a million years, Yeah. And the book is just all the better for it. I'm not going to tell Ryan Hughes how to design a book. It's why you hire Ryan Hughes.
Well, Rosemary, going from the idea of each process being controlled by different artists, like in November, when you did Don't Go Without Me, you did everything, right? So it's interesting to hear Matt discuss the idea of like the effective approaches in the scripting and seeing what you do in a page in this comic, because it really feels like there's like so many decisions being made on the page throughout this whole comic book. Like what I loved was this page here, where you kind of like push the panels in a little bit. The panels are smaller, and you're also using like the panel size to indicate this kind of like squeezing out of space. It's kind of like strangled moment. So is this something that you're actually writing, or going back to that idea of the artist kind of taking the script and turning it into the page? Does that come when you start doing the layouts? Like how do you what's your approach to working this stuff out?
It's a combination, I think. I mean, I generally write full scripts first. But in that, there's usually, just because like my brain is so hardwired to think in comics right now, while I am writing, there will be, flashes of how something is supposed to look or should look. It feels like the process of storytelling to me very much feels like I'm uncovering moss from like a statue that like already exists, and I'm kind of brushing away all the debris, and it's like showing itself to me slowly. So I'm figuring out like, what do I need to move around to get this to like show itself to me in its entirety? And so usually it's story first, and then there is, like I said, a bit of a like translation effort that happens where it's like, okay, I figured out all of the emotional beats of the story. Like, I know what this moment feels like. I know what this feels like start to finish. And then I have to kind of reverse engineer a way to translate what I know it's supposed to feel like to the reader. Which again, this scene is sort of right at the culmination where we are kind of, we realized before this that we are not where we are supposed to be, and that something a little sinister is happening, but this is sort of the moment of real forgetting. Like, this is when we as the reader and our character are sort of realizing simultaneously that she does not remember the love of her life. She is gone from her head completely. And so it's a moment that, again, I mentioned claustrophobia before, but it is, you are meant to feel constrained, and you are meant to feel trapped, and you are meant to sort of feel this encroaching feeling of dread, which is, obviously mirrored very one-to-one in the paneling decisions. And I also, I wanted a lot of these sort of, I don't know, Don't Go Without Me uses a lot of moment-to-moment transitions, sort of like multiple panels, a lot of real estate on the page devoted to like just one revelatory action or one sort of like moment of understanding, because it's a story that relies on noticing the shifting details of a moment. The paneling kind of has to be specific to facilitate the reader moving through a moment at the same time and in the same way that Luth moves through the moment. Discovering things at the same time as her. So the paneling is kind of, in this story, and I think in all the stories, is meant to kind of, provide a trellis to guide your perceptions, your emotional responses at the same pace as the main characters. Yeah, it's all done in service to what will make this moment sort of read the same way that I wrote it, or as close as possible. Just trying to bridge the gap between like me and another person.
I love that idea of like of implicating someone in that, because that's like, when you go see a film, a lot of the time you're kind of just like, you just go sit in a dark room and it can be quite passive, like this thing just plays in front of you. But with comics, I just think this is like, comics where bad things are happening to someone, in whatever aspect that is, but it's still like you're like turning the page every time, that's making the bad things happen to that person.
Like required participation, like you can't opt out. You're like the little Flintstones feet powering the little car.
That's the first time I've heard comics described as that, but that's perfect. One of the things I thought off the back of that was interesting. So like, there's the "Don't Go Without Me," the first page, which is the spread. Was also like, because you talked then about the kind of integration within the page, but that's a thing that you don't see this thing very often, where your background has like a kind of a texture, or like an image that the scene is kind of sat against. Is that something that you just know that needs to be there, or do you see that on the finished page and think that it's missing something? Or
I mean, so I come from like shoujo manga. Like the stuff that like made me want to make comics is shoujo manga from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, which I think a staple of a lot of those comics is a playfulness and a decorativeness in like how the page is designed and how the page is laid out that is it's very beautiful, but it's never accidental, and it's never I don't know, there's never like an absence of meaning. That never like there's a very incredible tightrope walk, I feel like, in a lot of shoujo manga, where paneling choices seem to be just sort of a aesthetic fun, but do a lot of the legwork in the moving the plot forward in the way that the artist wants it to move forward. So I always like I think it's like implanted in me to really gravitate towards sort of innovative or unique page designs. I mean, one of my favorite things when I'm like reading new comics now is when I stumble across like a page layout that I have never seen, never conceptualized, never even come close to like thinking about just laying out images in that way.
Right.
I think it's one of the most exciting things. And for me, there's a part of it that's just like, this is the way that I was taught to speak this language. So it's the way that I am most naturally inclined to do it. But also, making comics for me is both like the most selfish and one of the most communal things that I do. Like in that it's like, it's the way that I connect myself to the world I live in. It is how I make myself known to people and have them reciprocate. But it is also something that I do because I have like a compulsion to do it. And like, if I were just alone in a dark room, it would be what I was doing. Like it's, the act of it is both this like life affirming, life defining, like non-optional thing. So in that way, I'm only making them for myself. In that way, it is an extremely selfish pursuit. But because of that, like figuring out, I promise I'm landing this thread because of that kind of, figuring out what about like the act of making comics is the most enjoyable part physically, like what part of the process brings me joy, is very important to me, because I want to maximize the amount of sort of joy and pleasure that I get from the physical process of drawing, of writing, of like making this thing. And I have found that allowing myself to be indulgent about detail, about background, about design, sort of the problem solving of like, how do I come up with a page that doesn't look like any page I've ever drawn before, but that's still, its primary service is, to aid the story. That is like, that's the best. There's like literally nothing. That is the part, like if I could isolate one part of making comics where like, I just can enjoyment out of it, it's in that work. So a lot of the choices I make are a combination of me trying to problem solve, but also me being like, I really want to draw this. I want it to look like this. It will bring me joy if this page looks like this. So very cerebral and also very much not.
And Emma, you've got a similar approach in your work where the page design is just like really impacted by the contents of the scene, like this page here, right? Obviously, this is a huge and major sort of unique part about Pretty Deadly, I think, is how you turn kind of elements of like a larger image into the panels for everything else.
Yeah.
Firstly, like, why? Like, why do you find that interesting? Like, what are you kind of trying to do with your page by doing that?
I spoke about this stuff with Marcos quite a lot, because Marcos is like so thoughtful about narrative things, and I was like, this is like, I don't know how, but this is so easy for me to do, so I'm scared to do it very often. Somehow, no? It's as if, I know it's horrible to say, but it just comes. Like I have the page like on the table. Of course, I can't do that digitally. I need to have the full composition all the time. My eyes like to see how I'm going to guide the eye, to move through a page, because it's not easy. It's actually a bummer for readers. Okay? But I truly believe that, for example, when it comes to magic or to dreams or to weird stuff, it kind of helps to be a little confused reading, So I kind of keep these things only for magic alone, for the weird part alone. So I use that on the garden and on kind of trippy things inside. I also do trippy things without, because in Pretty Deadly there are a lot.
Yeah.
But it's as if like it has a lot to do with the pacing as well. Because in my head, it flows very fast like this. So you have to be careful and to stop and get confused a little.
Right.
But then if you do it like on regular paneling, suddenly there is a sequence in the I think is in issue 14, in which the transition from fighting the monster, the obsession, which is like very, very crazy, and all the panels are like this or worse. And then the trip continues because the transition to the room, and suddenly the room is full of water.
Yeah.
And that water doesn't exist. Or yes, we don't know.
Right.
But that water is an element who helps how Conjureman is feeling. And it was described on the street completely. It was more like talking about a continuation from the craziness of the magic of all the panels broken, no order following the page, or making things difficult for the reader, to a calmer moment in which you couldn't understand what's going on, because it was just a room full of water with a man like upside down. It was like very weird. Like, why is he here? But it was helping you feel the sadness, or it was helping you close the thing to incorporate to the rest of the regular narrative. So I try to use all these things for precisely trying to emphasize. It's not like mirror in a diegetic way, but it is like kind of making the reader like feel awkward. So
it's like making them aware of.
Not, but I'm trying to hack all the time. It's like I can't help it. It's like, to me, it doesn't need to get out of the page, but it's as if like I can make people feel things like this. I don't know. Or at least it would make me feel somehow.
Well, we when we did the magazine interview, because one of the things that we talked about was the fact that like the way that I feel about comics is that there is a natural level of like artifice, of like fakeness, and I think no matter how much you get involved in a story, I think you always are aware that you're reading a thing. Like, because you've got to turn a page, you've got to kind of pace it yourself. You have to, it's not like a film where you can just sit down and it all comes at you. You kind of have to be involved in the story. And so I find these pages really interesting because in one way they're really natural because they are the scene. Like the scene itself is wrapping around everything else, which is really natural. But on the other point, they kind of make you aware of the fact that they aren't a normal page. So there is an element, it feels like, of asking a reader to notice, like in this instance, notice that the page layout is different, right? Like look at the way that I'm using the page rather than just kind of read the pictures in order. Is there an element of that for you? Like, do you want people to kind of sort of take notice of the way the page is composed in that way?
Yeah, I want to transmit or to express something like this. Like, for example, these kind of artifices in comics work pretty nicely from the super European thing, like, or super independent, underground, whatever. Like this thing of, for example, starting with panel of one side and then starting making it smaller. And when you get to the last corner of the page, the last panel is like this. And then you turn the page and it's a double spread, for example.
Yeah.
So it's like you're reading that. If you're reading in, well, you can also read in the tablet, but it's like if you're reading the book like this, you are here, like, and then you turn the page and you are like here. So there are ways to interact with people. And if you think about, for example, shoujo manga from the 70s, it is very easy for them. They don't use backgrounds. So it's as if they happen in some kind of nowhere, like nothing. There's no place there. So everything is like happening in, it's as if the only thing they are drawing is like the feelings or the thoughts of people, how they figure things out, or how they imagine the erotism or the dramatic feelings between the couples or something, or not just love, like how the grown of the characters. But so that stuff is like, how can you make something happen only with eyes and faces, quick panels, like composition, and the rest is completely white? How can you make this work that well? I have to draw everything, So it fascinates me. Like, I think it has a lot to do with the pacing and the way you read. For me, comics is like the best thing of comics is like, it's precisely that. It's like you speak with your reader, but by making it try to read the flow you want to bring to the story. So in a film, I've never worked on anything audiovisual, but I like cinema a lot. So, but it's true that you have other stuff. You can count off music or silences. You can just have one. I don't know, like Tarkovsky. You can have just 1 minute or one image, and just be like there thinking as if you were staring at a painting on a museum. But in comics, like normally people tend to read it very fast, which is good. No, but you have to hack that somehow. You have to manipulate or trying to convince them, your readers, that maybe that rhythm can be a little different in this work, or because it's the way I can express myself better. I don't know.
Is that why you rarely use like a structured grid? Like a lot of time you're always kind of changing where panels are next to the next one, and they're always kind of changing sizes. Is that you trying to control the reader a bit more?
But you can also control that in a grid. It depends on a lot on what is drawn inside. Imagine for a moment that I use a 9-panel grid. The first one is like only, one bird, one feather, one knife on the floor. You can't totally control that. Or I could transform this based on 9-panel grid. But in my case, it's just I feel more comfortable. Like for me, it's easier to manipulate the rhythm like this than in a 9-panel grid. Also, because I have this way my own style, so I'm good at doing like this weird composition. So it would be a shame that I wouldn't do it from time to time. But it's true. Like for example, in the last story I'm doing, like I'm working more in a line in which that was like to challenge myself. Because I work like this on Pretty Deadly, and it's very attached to how the book is. I did that on Mirror, like in the last volume. When you read it, you'll see like the last 40 pages. They are watercolors, and I draw them without a gutter.
Right. Okay.
So they are all like compositions like this because it's kind of. Because it was like a crazy thing with it. No, I like it, but it was very difficult to do it.
Right.
Because it was very magical, very cosmic stuff, with lots of things happening and a lot of reveals of the past. So I thought that would be the way. After that, I say, well, next book I have to change this and to try to do something else.
Right.
So probably my next work, I'm working more like in a way in which we created the room full of water.
Right.
Like trying to bring stuff that it's not actually happened, but it's happening in the head of the characters as feels, or the way they are feeling about things, or trying to explain things by drawing them like this without words, than breaking all the panels. So just to try something else. But I mean, it depends a lot on on everything. It's not just, if you do a lot of panels, it's decompression.
Yep.
If you do very few panels, it's also decompression. It cannot be. Like, it depends more on what's inside each panel.
And that's really the thing I love so much about comics is that we discuss all these different approaches, and we're doing this for a long time and talking to a lot of people about how they make comics. But none of this is really like concrete or decisive in that there's like a right way or a wrong way of how the medium works. It's all open to different styles for everyone kind of making that work. And comics is also very layered, right? This is another thing that from like a lettering perspective that I find really, really interesting is, the artist draws the comic based on the script. And then the colors kind of are literally being placed like on top of the line work, and then like the letters are being placed on top of the colors and the line work, and you see this kind of like interesting layer. So like ending with you, Matt, as someone who is essentially the very start of that process, how does this layering then kind of affect you, or does it affect you as a writer?
And I don't know if it's a relic of the kind of work for hire grinded out past or what, but I don't know. There's a like. We should go back. Like you should readdress things. Like,
right.
I want to massage stuff until they pull it out of my hands every single time. Like you can make it better. You can make it better. You can keep making it better. You can keep refining. I get the work back, and I see. There are a couple. November 4 goes to press Monday, I think, and like. Kurt's kind of last pass, I was still going through and like trying not to throw work away, but like I can make this caption 2 lines instead of 3, or 3 lines instead of 4, and he can change the box. Like it's that level of like, why wouldn't you respond to the work that you get back? You know what I mean? Like it should be these things should all be pulled out of our cold dead hands by sweaty, desperate editors. Like it's the collaboration should only stop when the presses start to roll, I think.
What a better way to end than prying the panel out of our cold, dead hands. I just want to say, firstly, a huge thank you to everyone watching. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, and I hope you're enjoying the rest of the great panels from Thought Bubble's online show this year. Hope we've entertained you a little bit as well, of course. And a massive thank you to my virtual panelies in Matt Fraction, Rosemary Valero-O'Connell, and Emma Rios. You can be able to find them online in various ways. We'll put it on the screen. And hopefully we'll get to see you in person at Thought Bubble in 2021, do this all over again. So for now, thanks again, and go and enjoy some great comics and content. See you later.